Breaking tonight. A new fear is spreading across Washington, Tel Aviv, and every U.S. naval command watching the Persian Gulf. Reports and strategic warnings are raising one explosive question. Has Iran gained access to Russia's Zircon hypersonic missile, a weapon publicly described by Russia in the Mach 8 to Mach 9 class, with a reported range of more than 1,000 kilometers? Reuters and AP have both described Zircon as a real Russian hypersonic missile in that speed and range category. If the answer is even partially yes, the consequences are enormous. Because this is not just another missile headline. This is a story about whether one of the core symbols of American power, the aircraft carrier, could now face a much more dangerous threat environment in the Gulf. And if that threat is real, then the old assumptions about deterrence in the region may already be under pressure. Now let's start with the most important point. There is a difference between what is confirmed and what is being feared. What is confirmed is that Zircon is real. Reuters reported it as a Russian hypersonic cruise missile flying up to around 9 times the speed of sound, with a range of more than 1,000 kilometers. AP likewise described it as one of Russia's most advanced hypersonic weapons. What is also confirmed is that Iran is actively seeking more advanced foreign weapons. Reuters reported a secret missile deal between Iran and Russia earlier this year, and separately reported that Iran was nearing a deal with China for advanced anti-ship missile systems and other high-end military hardware. What is not independently confirmed by major wire services in the public reporting we have is the specific claim that Iran has already received Zircon 3 M22 missiles from Russia. And that matters. Because for a U.S. audience, the strongest version of this story is not pretending certainty where certainty does not exist. The strongest version is asking the more serious question: what happens if Iran is moving closer to this kind of anti-ship capability, whether through direct transfer, deeper Russian technical support, or a broader leap in missile power? That is why this story is exploding. Because the moment people hear Mach 8, carrier killer, and Iran, they understand the deeper fear immediately. This is not simply about one weapon. It is about whether America's ability to project power close to the battlefield is becoming more dangerous, more costly, and less automatic than before. And that is why the line U.S. Navy's $13B carriers at risk is so powerful. Because a carrier is not just hardware. It is a statement. It represents reach. It represents air power. It represents deterrence. It represents the idea that Washington can move overwhelming force into a crisis zone and keep it there. So if a new class of missile can even plausibly pressure that model, then the story immediately becomes bigger than one Iran headline. It becomes a story about the future credibility of U.S. naval dominance in the Gulf. And that takes us to the real reason Mach 8 matters. Speed changes defense. A slower threat gives defenders at least some time to detect, identify, track, assign a response, launch interceptors, and attempt a kill. A faster threat compresses that sequence brutally. And once the timeline shrinks enough, even advanced defense systems start feeling less comfortable. That is the real meaning of a Mach 8-9 missile. Not just that it is fast, but that it changes the engagement window. Modern defense works in a chain. Detect, classify, track, decide, assign, intercept, reassess. That chain is already difficult under pressure. Under a hypersonic threat, every second becomes more valuable, every delay more dangerous, and every mistake harder to recover from. That is why hypersonic systems matter so much in strategic planning. Reuters and AP both frame Zircon as a weapon designed to challenge existing missile defense timelines and assumptions. Now add the maritime dimension. A U.S. aircraft carrier is not a hidden target. It is enormous. It operates with escorts. It launches aircraft. It sits at the center of a strike group built for war. The problem is not finding it in theory. The problem is reaching it through layered defense. And that is exactly why the carrier killer framing has so much emotional force. Because the point of a missile like Zircon is not simply speed for its own sake. It is speed used to pressure the entire carrier defense architecture: early warning, shipboard interceptors, radar tracking, electronic warfare, timing, coordination, and confidence. That matters because even if such a system never fires in combat, it can still change behavior. Ships may stay farther out. Routes become more cautious. Operating patterns shift. Political leaders become more risk-aware. Allies grow more anxious. Adversaries start believing that pressure works. And once that happens, the missile is already having a strategic effect. That is what makes this story so dangerous. The threat does not need to be fully proven in public to start changing calculations in private. And that is especially true if you are Washington. Because if the Zircon threat is real or serious enough to be treated as real, then the United States faces the kind of problem every superpower hates most. Not a lack of power, but a lack of clean choices. Broadly speaking, Washington has three options. Option 1. Strike hard. This is the emotionally satisfying option. If Iran is moving toward a Mach 8 anti-carrier capability, then the aggressive response would be to hit the launch infrastructure, support network, storage sites, technical personnel, or related missile nodes before the threat fully matures. The logic is clear. Do not let the enemy lock in a new strategic advantage. But the danger is just as clear. A strike large enough to seriously degrade a hardened missile capability inside Iran would not look like a limited signal. It would look like the opening phase of a much larger war. Reuters' broader reporting already shows how tightly missile pressure, regional escalation, and U.S.-Iran confrontation are linked. And once that escalation begins, Tehran would be under enormous pressure to answer. That answer could come through missiles, through drones, through regional militias, through shipping pressure, through Hormuz. So yes, striking first may sound decisive, but it may also be the move that turns a strategic scare into a full regional war. Option 2. Pull naval assets farther back. From a narrow military standpoint, this is rational. Distance is protection. A carrier farther from the threat envelope is harder to target and easier to defend. But strategically, this option is painful, because the very move that protects the carrier may weaken the deterrent image the carrier was meant to project. Allies would read it, enemies would read it, markets would read it, and Iran would absolutely read it. That is the central dilemma. The move that preserves the platform may damage the symbol. And in the Gulf, symbols matter. If U.S. carriers begin operating farther back under pressure from a new Iranian missile threat, the military logic may be sound, but the geopolitical signal may still feel like caution, discomfort, or even retreat. Option 3. Adapt, harden, and buy time. This is the most disciplined path. Not panic, not full escalation, not dramatic withdrawal. Instead, Washington could change operating patterns, expand surveillance, harden defense layers, rely more on submarines and land-based aircraft, and quietly adjust posture while it works to determine whether the threat is real, exaggerated, or somewhere in between. Strategically, this may be smartest in the short term. But even this option has a weakness. Time can look like hesitation. And hesitation is dangerous in a crisis driven by speed, symbolism, and fear. That is the trap. Every U.S. choice solves one problem by creating another. Strike hard, and you may widen the war. Pull back, and you may weaken deterrence. Adapt carefully, and you may invite questions about resolve. And that is exactly why a Mach 8 threat matters so much. Not only because of what the missile can do physically, but because of what it does psychologically to American planning. Now, for Israel, the concern is different but just as serious. Israel is not only asking whether a missile like Zircon could threaten the U.S. Navy. Israel is asking what this kind of capability says about the broader direction of Iranian power. Because Israel's security model has always rested on one core principle: qualitative military edge. Better intelligence, better integration, better interception, better strike capacity, and stronger U.S. coordination than any rival can match. That is not just military doctrine, it is the foundation of Israeli deterrence. If Iran moves closer to a new class of speed, range, and anti-ship or precision strike pressure, that edge does not disappear overnight, but it does come under fresh stress. Reuters reporting that Iran is pursuing more advanced anti-ship missile systems is exactly why Israeli planners would take even an unconfirmed Zircon scenario seriously. And the timing makes it worse. Israel is not operating in a relaxed environment with spare room for error. It is already dealing with a dense and costly threat environment. That means a new, high-end Iranian capability would not arrive in empty space. It would arrive in a system already under strain. And when a system is already under strain, even a possible new threat creates real pressure, because planning must move ahead of perfect certainty. Israeli strategists cannot wait for courtroom-level proof if the consequence of waiting is that a qualitatively new missile challenge enters the regional equation before defenses and doctrine catch up. Reuters and AP both describe Zircon and hypersonic weapons more broadly as troubling because they compress response timelines in ways existing defenses were not originally designed around. There is also a political layer to this. Israel does not only need to be defended, it needs to look defensible. That matters because deterrence depends on belief. What enemies believe you can stop, what citizens believe you can withstand, and what allies believe you can manage without dragging them into something larger. If Iran appears to be moving toward a missile capability that compresses reaction time and complicates interception, then all three of those belief systems come under pressure. Enemies may feel encouraged. Citizens may feel more exposed. Allies may feel more urgency. That is why Israel would not see a Zircon-style threat as just another technical upgrade. It would see it as a strategic stress multiplier. Now widen the lens. Because if Iran is moving toward a Mach 8 class anti-ship threat, this stops being just an Iran story. It becomes a Gulf story, a U.S. deterrence story, and potentially a global power projection story. The Gulf matters because it sits at the intersection of military power, alliance, credibility, and energy security. Reuters has repeatedly tied Gulf instability and advanced anti-ship threats to wider strategic and market anxiety. For the Gulf states, this would be deeply uncomfortable. Many of them built their security assumptions around visible American presence and the belief that Washington can move major naval assets close enough to matter during a crisis. If a new Iranian capability complicates that assumption, every Gulf capital has to ask harder questions. How close can U.S. naval power safely operate? How quickly can Washington respond under higher risk? And if carriers must behave more cautiously, what does that mean for reassurance? Those are not academic questions. They go straight to how allies measure the durability of American protection. Then there is the economic dimension. The Gulf is not only a military theater, it is an economic nerve center. Once advanced missile threats start affecting naval posture, shipping assumptions, or escalation calculations, the market effect can arrive before any missile is ever fired. Reuters has repeatedly linked Gulf instability and Hormuz-related fears to oil price volatility because so much global energy trade still depends on that corridor. That is why this story can move markets even without full confirmation. Because markets react to risk. They react to the possibility that the region is becoming harder to stabilize. If Iran appears to be gaining faster, harder to stop anti-ship capability, insurers, tanker operators, energy traders, and governments all begin adjusting expectations. Not because they know exactly what will happen, but because they know the cost of being wrong is high, and now widen the lens one more time. Because a threat to U.S. carriers is not only read by Iran. It is read by Russia. It is read by China. It is read by every state, studying whether new missile technology can narrow the gap between regional powers and American naval dominance. That is why the global significance of this story could be much larger than one rumored transfer. If a sufficiently advanced anti-ship missile can force American carriers to operate farther out, more cautiously, or under greater political constraint, then the symbolic cost is enormous. Because U.S. power projection has long depended on something very visible, the ability to place major naval assets near contested theaters and make that presence look normal. If that presence begins to look more conditional, more vulnerable, or more negotiated by threat, then adversaries everywhere take note. That does not mean American power disappears, but it does mean the image of effortless dominance becomes harder to sustain. And in geopolitics, image matters because image shapes calculations before wars begin. That is the deeper meaning of this story. Not that the balance has already been permanently rewritten overnight, but that the assumptions underneath the old balance may now be under more serious pressure than before. Can U.S. carriers still operate close enough to reassure allies without taking unacceptable risk? Can Israel preserve its qualitative edge if Iran keeps climbing the missile ladder? Can Washington deter escalation without being pushed into either overreaction or visible caution? Those are the real questions driving this crisis. And that is why this should not be treated as just another viral missile headline. It should be treated as a warning that the Gulf may be entering a faster, tighter, more dangerous phase. A warning that deterrence may be getting harder to maintain at the old cost. And a warning that once high-end missile threats enter the regional equation, the next crisis may move faster than diplomacy can keep up. This is Redline Report. If you think Iran is getting closer to a capability that could seriously challenge U.S. naval dominance in the Gulf, drop your view in the comments right now. Has the balance of power already started to shift, or is this still a fear being amplified before the facts are fully in? And if you want hard-hitting, high-stakes geopolitical analysis on the biggest flashpoints in the world, make sure you like this video, subscribe to Redline Report, and turn on notifications so you do not miss the next update. Because if this story keeps moving, the next development could hit faster than Washington, Tel Aviv, or the markets are ready for.